welcome to another episode of Trace and Tell with Ade and Joe. Today is Thursday, the 5th of March, 2026. And today we're going to do something a little bit different from what we usually do. But like before I get into that, how are you, Joe?
Yeah, doing good. Um, Spring is finally arriving, so happy about that. And yeah, looking forward to today's conversation, recapping some interesting reports, and yeah, I think the viewers will like it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, definitely spring is back, and it's good to have a bit of sun. uh,
Yes, definitely.
yeah, so kind of like getting into the conversation of today, right? So, what we're doing today is kind of like analyzing. Well, I would necessarily call it phone analysis because we can't actually go that deep into the reports, but we have four reports that we are going to be talking about, at least from four of the biggest analytics companies within the space, from Chainalysis to TRM Labs to Elliptic and Crystal. And just a little bit of context, or yeah, I'll call it context. Chainalysis has been releasing bits and pieces of their 2026 report. So what we are going to be talking about from Chainalysis' point of view is not the full 2026 typology report. Crystal also hasn't released anything yet for 2026, but they released something late last year, which was like their latest. The same thing for Elliptic. However, TRM Labs is the only company that has released a full 2026 report. So, um, when we are talking about certain numbers or specific typologies, please have this in mind, just so we don't give the wrong impression that this is what this particular analytics company is saying for 2025 or 2026. So, yeah. Uh, that being said, and I think you could have also gotten what we are going to be talking about. So it's kind of like the crypto landscape, crypto crime landscape. Um, kind of just looking at some of the specific trends that each of these players or all of them has agreed on and has pointed out. And I think this first one to start with, I don't think this should come off as a surprise. It's AI. Just even from all angles, everything happening in the world right now, uh, kind of like have bits and pieces of AI involved. So, and I think also it's not far fetched to think crypto is also going to have that. So, yeah, we are going to be starting with AI and specifically what the trends is like from um, these players. Do you want to share a little bit on that, Joe?
Yeah, so obviously AI is the king of buzzwords and has been for some time. It's impacting the industry in, yeah, I mean, so many different ways, whether it's helping scammers and thieves, helping uh, even government uh, institutions like North Korea attacking things, or Iran or Russia, whatever. Yeah, it's helping so much on the illicit side, and but also helping on the compliance and prevention side. And these reports cover those angles in various ways. I think the Elliptic report did a lot of good, maybe covered it a little more in depth. Um, First, talking about the risk side of things. So, of course, deepfakes becoming better and better as LLMs progress,
Mm,
and how this is a huge risk for compliance teams, and yeah, allowing whoever to create a fake identification and get through a KYC process and open an account. Uh, from an investigator perspective, this is really concerning since you spend so much time investigating and tracing, and usually the big takeaway from investigations is finding those KYC opportunities,
yeah.
and where a uh, yeah, a illicit actor try to launder the funds. So if this suddenly becomes irrelevant or not a confident place to find identification, it's already a little bit risky. I think even through like real IDs and money mules and um, before AI was so good at this, it was already a bit shaky.
Yeah.
um, and yeah, and now it's like really concerning. So I am not privy to what happens internally at centralized exchanges and other places. However, hopefully they're managing this somehow. I don't know. You would maybe know better than me, Ade, but it does. Yeah, that's the one big thing that comes to mind when I start thinking it from like the investigator perspective.
Yeah, I think yes, definitely. Like it's it's sort of it's it's kind of like what you would call like the two-edged sword, where um as good as it is for compliance and security and just about everything, automating stuff, getting stuff done better, finding bugs that you wouldn't necessarily find, or finding it better or in a quicker um, period. It also has like kind of like the other side of it, of like as you're thinking of using it for good, some guys are also thinking of how to exploit it to beat your systems, right? So yeah, I think like you mentioned also, it's very big in scams. I think even like taking away the whole scam thing, people, there have been a lot of different Twitter posts where people would generate interesting pictures. And I think with the latest release of Nano Banana, it has even gone really, really, it has gone really, really better, because right now you really can't even pick out the difference between um, the real versus what was generated with AI or by AI. So, like, yeah, AI is definitely a big one. We see it in scams, we see it in even in ransomware, being able to identify certain exploits that people can use. So I think this is something that majority of the report actually pointed out to, and I believe we'll still kind of like show a couple of numbers around these things. So, but before we move on, this is from a report by Elliptic, where they sort of like detailed the use of AI in scams and fraud. So like mentioned the different approaches, and even a little bit of image around how it works within exchanges. Going through the details of how an illicit actor establishes accounts at exchanges using AI generated images and communications. It is a very detailed one, and I think it's something we see across um, the different typologies, to be honest, because it's not just only a scam related stuff. And I think it's also something that kind of like pops up in um, ransomware, hacks, exploits, uh, just name it. Maybe not in human trafficking, but potentially also in system. I would assume. But yeah. Any take on this again?
No, I mean, AI, generative AI is now just another useful tool to scale scamming operations. Particularly, I think it talks about here in this elliptic report. And yeah, I mean, you already like thinking about scams that have investigated, and like a fake investment scam or something like that, or a romance scam now that can be almost like automated, and maybe one scammer can now suddenly run 20, 30, if not more, different chats and outreach campaigns to find more victims and simply automate it and curate the content and the dialogue with generative AI. And yeah, it just scales their operation, and um, way more activity out there in the digital world. So yeah, that's something certainly to keep an eye on and be concerned about. I think Elliptic brings the example of this was back in the 2024 US election, how there was a scam operation, yeah, with Trump there and mimicking his voice. Yeah, exactly. Mimicking his voice from previous recordings and um, swooing and faking people into investing with him. Some different like giveaway. Yeah, exactly. So this was early too, like 2024, when maybe the population wasn't so aware of how you can fake voices and things like that. So probably like a older boomer crowd too, I would suspect. So yeah. Anyways, that's one concrete example of how it's being used, and yeah.
And I
So
think
the
another way,
game just got more intense.
yeah, another way it's also being used, which Ellipsis, like mentioned in here, was that it's obviously could be part of the solution, and this is for like compliance analysts and the likes. And in here, they kind of just mentioned kind of briefly, AI generates a summary report of the risk alert and investigations findings that can be used in support of SAR and other report filing, saving hours of effort for analysts and investigators. And I think this is something that a lot of people have been trying to figure out how it can be done, because like writing SAR is not. I won't say is not the easiest, but it's sort of like repetitive to the point that you have to submit the same SAR to, I don't know, three or four different jurisdictions, and they have their own specific formats. Many of these things are sort of like is the same narrative, is the same blockchain address, the same transaction ads, the same value, and you have to manually input some of these things into those particular portals. So it's a lot of work, and if AI can sort of like take up those automations, and I think it's definitely good. And I think outside of all of these reports, I think there's something mentioned by um, I can't remember his name right now, and he works with Caldena. Yeah, I've forgotten his name. So where he sort of like mentioned how they are using MCP to sort of like ingest or kind of like fast track investigations using their own data at Caldena, and obviously that's just kind of like being able to use AI to kind of like improve on the investigation, so like taking your specific labeled addresses, on top of that having an MCP, and then you can just sort of like query that MCP server and then ask it like, oh, this is a transaction hash based on the rules I've set and based on the things you know and the data you have from our internal database, run through this transaction hash and figure out end to end where exactly the transaction go to. So I think those are like some of like the good aspect of which AI would come in very handy for investigators.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Codina. That's like Marion is his name,
Yes,
right?
Marian. Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, cool. Yeah,
Cool.
interesting. Yeah, they're really. They seem pretty in the AI, like really trying to leverage AI for their solutions. And yeah, you're. I mean, like compliance. Yeah, obviously we read the risks every day and in the news of how AI is helping illicit actors, but yeah, compliance teams and investigators are already really, I think, bogged down and under resourced, and they're always fighting. They're, if you work at a for-profit sort of company, yeah, like an exchange or something, compliance teams are always fighting for I don't know, their survival and
Yeah.
legitimacy. So resources are limited, and AI can obviously be a big tool to help people, yeah, leverage more work, scale work, and get more done, and uh, yeah, just be more efficient. So yeah, that's the exciting part about it.
So yeah, coming back to the second conversation around what we identified in some of these reports across board, and that is the professionalization of illicit services. Right here on my screen is showing of pig ecosystem, but I think from the report, what we discovered was like it's not just only a scam thing. It's not scam as a service anymore. It's more or less like potentially all illicit services as no, potentially all illicit actions as a service in this case, right? Yeah. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, this was across a lot of the reports that if you work in this industry, it's probably not nothing too new to you, but we're seeing the professionalization of scam operations, particularly scam operations, and how they're getting more economically efficient, like compartmentalizing the different parts of a scam operation. So, yeah, having people who do more of the laundering side of things, people who do more of the impersonating side of things, the more social engineering side of things, etc. And they make it more efficient this way. Like I think one of the articles talks about uh, specifically in dark net markets, how uh, they've become really almost like going to a business, going to like Amazon and having a wholesale supply network. They even have rating and reputation type of systems like, oh, this service was better than that one. So customer feedback, pretty sophisticated dead drop networks where they can deliver the products and yeah, they even have like customer dispute resolution processes on some of these darknet markets. So, yeah, just like a clear example of almost becoming like a real business and having different economical segments to the scam. So, or not scam, darknet market, but yeah, scams are the same. So,
Yeah, I think an example is in here where Chainalysis mentioned that various Chinese criminal underground entities have purchased lighthouse phishing kits and received payment from several Chinese money laundering networks and fraud shops. So basically, this is kind of like this specific group comprises of Chinese-speaking operators suspected of engaging in fraudulent criminal activities, including the sale of phishing kits. So the way they are structured basically suggests it's a distribution channel for malicious tools designed to facilitate illicit activity. So it's sort of like a one-stop shop for almost everything you need to get your illicit activities out. And I think there's also a bit of mention of something related to that on TRM, and I think it's almost almost like the same trend across board, but kind of like adapted for different typologies because in here
yeah,
TRM is sort of like referring to it kind of like the same trend from the Chinese fentanyl precursor supply chains, right? Where uh, so the sort of like mentioned like the Chinese precursor manufacturers are the dominant global supplier. These supplies remained active under even enforcement actions, right? So it's sort of like something you see across board where there's a little bit of professionalization in some of these services, and it's yeah. In as much as I think one thing I'm kind of getting out of all of this is the fact that in as much as there is a little bit of maybe not a little, but there's a bit of professionalization in some of these services. It's also going to lead to a couple of patterns being recognized. When you see certain things happening in a certain way, you can more or less attribute it to a specific organization or to a specific illicit group, things of that nature. It's I think it's a very interesting um, um, nuance in this ecosystem where you could potentially tell what drug a drug marketplace looks like from a professional point of view and what a DPRK action would look like from a laundering point of view when it comes to their professional arms of those services.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, what makes me think too is how we've seen more previously with ransomware as a service. Now we're seeing it with the phishingware as a service or drainer as a service sort of typologies. And yeah, I wrote actually did some blogging on that recently, and yeah, you see the same things. Basically, there's a like business developer person who's searching for victims or doing the more social engineering side of things, and then there's the more um, person supplying the code and the back end operations, and then they take a cut of the stolen goods, and you can see it. If you study them, you see on chain where exactly 70% of the stolen money goes one way, and then 30% goes the other, and it repeats. And yeah, I mean, it's becoming this, and it does relate a little bit to like the AI stuff we were just speaking about, because I think a lot of these drainer as a service operations now have become more prevalent too, because people can just copy paste the illicit draining code and put it up on a landing page, and you don't really need any crazy technical skills, and the obfuscation that you can use with like Copilot or something can make it real difficult for investigators or people to dissect that code. So yeah, another element how it relates back to AI and uh, why these things are becoming more prevalent.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that we are going to see more of this year. I just remember there was a news I was reading recently on Twitter, I believe, where a company or maybe a group, maybe they don't even have a company name, a group used Claude to, Claude was a co-developer of their smart contract and it got exploited. So, yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's one of those very interesting things. But I kind of feel like we are going to see more of it. There is now all of those Claude bots, club boats, and the multiple variations of those boats right now. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting space, and I think it's also calls into question how exactly um these tools are sort of like getting up to speed with this efficiency that comes with the illicit actions, right? Because if an AI can potentially just send funds across, I don't know, 100 wallets in a second. Well, obviously, barring that there is blockchain block time involved, if it can send like one transactions across multiple blockchain, oh sorry, across multiple wallet addresses in like 5 minutes or even 2 minutes, how exactly does that relate to the transaction monitoring solution of this particular analytics company? And how are they surfacing those risks to the services that they that are using them? Like I think that's also something that we have to um, um, talk more on. But I think this would be like a good segue to the Beacon Network conversation around how exactly TRM Labs and potential. I think on our last conversation we had the conversation around what exactly is the conflict doing and how exactly is the conflict helping to sort of like surface risk as soon as possible across, albeit to law enforcement. But in terms of this kind of like scenario, what exactly do you think is sort of like the case for Beacon Networking here? What's the play?
Yeah, we were looking across the reports, and one of the themes too was talking about understanding behavioral tendencies or a behavioral analysis from the on chain data. And the TRM report spoke about this from their Beacon network, particularly, and yeah, how they're being able to find these behavioral tendencies and from there help predict when certain scams might take place, how they might take place, and put in some sort of prevention mechanism. I think one I wasn't sure if it was the TRM report, but one was talking about how the on-chain data would show that during Chinese New Year time, there's always this big dip in scams and the activity, like on Tron specifically, and of course with everything being associated with Southeast Asia, which is pretty interesting. That's just an example of what the on-chain data can show you about the behavioral and uh, open source intelligence on such cases. But yeah, I don't know what else was you took away from that.
Yeah, I think it's I saw the I think it was from Crystal, but I may be wrong. I saw the post also regarding the Chinese New Year and kind of like the nexus to is like to how transactions happens on chain, and it's a very interesting one. I think it's not just only the Chinese New Year. I think also being able to kind of like identify a specific time that certain transactions occur can also speak to where the address owner is based at, right? Like if it's like midnight European time, you probably know this person is more or less in Southeast Asia. If it's like early morning or maybe like late evening European time, it's probably like this person is in America and the likes, right? So it's those sort of like on-chain attributions are they good pointer on some of these things, and I think it's a very interesting case, which will most likely uh, kind of it is circling back to the AI conversation. We'll be able to see how AI can identify some of these patterns more than what we could in terms of like how we can like aggregate this point of different data factors and then be able to identify certain unique nuances on like, oh, based on XYZ, this is definitely this place or this is most likely to be this place, right? So I think we get to see that more. But on the Baking Network conversation, like just here on my screen, like it's like a real-time intelligence sharing system that allows law enforcement agents to flag addresses linked to financial crime, immediately alerting exchanges and triggering risk-based responses. Um, Very much like what we discussed the last time with the conflicts, and I think it's also a very good solution out there because, like, the more we get this, my point still remains that many of these solutions need to speak to each other.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
silo is not what we need within this space, but yeah, I think it's a very good one.
Yeah, I think the report talks about, is it a ransomware service called Akira or something? And yeah, basically from the behavior of the on-chain data, they could identify that it was indeed this ransomware as a service network. They probably like spun it up with some new accounts or a new sort of infrastructure, and then, oh, we've seen this before, and identified that it was them. So uh, yeah, good example there.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, if you guys want, you can just go there. We can't necessarily cover everything, but like yeah, there is a
Yeah,
detailed
definitely not.
there's a detailed explanation of how based on the on-chain data they're able to kind of like identify this Akira ransomware. And so yeah, we'll take a short break now before we come back to our last conversation. All right, welcome back to this episode. And I just to kind of like wrap up this episode, we will quickly touch on stablecoins and how it has become. Well, I think from onset, stablecoin has always been like the main rail by which um threat actors sort of like move funds around. And the fact that there are more stable coins in the ecosystem than 2, 3 years ago makes it even a bit more interesting. And like Elliptic mentioned in here, stablecoin has become the number one uh, assets by which so sanctioned cybercriminals such as North Korea frequently obtain stablecoins when hacking crypto platforms. These funds are typically converted into other assets and sometimes swap back into stablecoins before being exchanged for fiat currencies. And I think it's something we've seen also majorly on Tron Network, just to speed, I would say.
Yep.
Nothing more than that. Yeah, speed and liquidity, and it's a very interesting take on it. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, stable coins are provide great utility. That's why they're used. I mean, yes, on the illicit side of things, but they were established initially, I think, more for DeFi purposes and being able to trade and have coins hold their value instead of swing, 10, 20% within a day or something like. Bitcoin or Ethereum or other coins could do. So yeah, they're not all bad. Obviously, they provide a great utility, and unfortunately, probably the majority of their use now is for, well, I don't know. I shouldn't say that. Maybe on Tron. Tron seems to be the big player for a lot of that due to its low transaction fees and this sort of thing. And I think, yeah, if you go to like CoinMarketCap or CoinGecko, I think it's like probably top 10, top 15 market capitalization coins, and mostly used for illicit activity as far as I'm aware. So yeah, I mean that's the medium of choice that these scammers are using. I mean, I know there's an interesting debate in case studies around USDC and USDT and how they can freeze. Tron is not so in the storyline for this. I mean, does Tron do freezing much? Actually, not. I
No,
just
no, no.
realized.
No,
Yeah,
Tron doesn't. But I think the conversation was around how well does USDT, or maybe not how well, um, how much does USDT freezes versus SECO.
USDC.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, and I think there was also a bit of nuance to that. That due to the fact that not majority, due to the fact that a number of transactions on Tron, due to what you've mentioned being low gas fees, liquidity, and speed of the network. Because of that, the SECO decided to kind of like stop issuing USDC on Tron, which is a very
mm,
interesting take. So yeah, I think that conversation is up there definitely. And I think obviously based on how well a specific stablecoin is used would also attract the illicit actors. So that could potentially speak to why USDT is sort of like what's the word? Is being used more compared to USDC when it comes to these illicit activities. And I definitely won't put it beyond the threat actors also seeing that like okay, a specific table coin gets frozen more than the others, they might potentially just switch to the other ones that doesn't get frozen and like oh yeah, this is a loophole that we can obviously exploit. So it's a very interesting case out there.
definitely. Yeah, I mean, um, yeah. There's also a lot of uptick now. I think like this past year, if we're focusing on the last 12 months or so, even they're not stable coins, but privacy coins come to mind with potentially being used more by illicit actors and um, yeah, I don't know. It made me think because I know like on darknet markets, they're moving more towards Monero, even more so now than I think than like USDT or stable coins. So yeah, it would just be interesting to see if like stablecoin keeps its fame as the main function or the main medium for illicit activity, or if some of these privacy coins increase in volume, which I think they did. It's actually interesting. The reports don't mention that too much here, but I do think 2025 was a big year for privacy coins. And yeah, let's see if in the next version of these reports they address it a bit more. So
Yeah, yeah. And talking about this report to kind of like uh to complete, I think it's obvious we should talk about some of the numbers that have been mentioned in here. And mentioned by Chainalysis, just specific on scams and fraud, they recorded 17 billion estimated stolen funds, 17 billion uh, regarding crypto scams and fraud in 2025. As we've said, obviously, AI enablement surge. So, what's your take on this number? And I think before we go into this number, so we can kind of put everything into context. Um, yeah, TRM Labs also mentioned that illicit crypto volume reached an all-time high of 158 billion in 2025, which is up by 145%. So, what's your take on these two numbers?
yeah, it's yeah. I mean, the whole number, like, I think a lot of these reports and teams like grabbing the attention with the big number, and I guess it does help contextualize and give some understanding of what's going on. But yeah, big differences between the two reports. I mean, to be fair though, the TRM report I think is including everything under the sun regarding illicit activities. So also like sanctions, and that will keep a big chunk of it, while the Chainalysis was just strictly scams and fraud. So I mean, when I investigate, it's typically relating to scams and fraud, and 17 billion is, yeah, really a big number still. And yeah, exactly. So, a lot coming probably from certain countries and jurisdictions, and I'm sure big parts like strictly just like U.S. or uh, yeah, maybe Europe. I don't know, certain Western countries, things like that. And yeah, it is kind of crazy to see, and it's become now a national security thing, and rightly so. But yeah, the numbers are, because I think if you look at it throughout the years with chain, it's about the same. So it goes up a little, goes down a little. Finding the exact amount is difficult. I think they even say this should be kept as uh, a floor and not a ceiling, and likely the number is much more because so many scams go unreported. It's hard to get all the correct data. So yeah, just take the numbers a little bit with a grain of salt. It's just to give you sort of a associated idea. Um, and yeah, still a big number though at the end of the day.
Definitely, yeah, still a big number. And kind of just putting this into context of, yeah, I feel like when Chainalysis decides to put out their full reports, and we get to see the difference between every other typology versus scam,
Yeah,
I still feel like scam is still going to be way, 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 way higher than the rest, because it's it's sort of like the easy entry into every sort of like illicit activity, to be honest. Not everybody is a Bybit with a pocket of 1.4 billion that you can just hack in one day, right? So it definitely is a big number, and we'll keep track on all of these numbers and these typologies and these reports. The more they come out, we'll probably talk about some of them in some of our um, ongoing conversation. So, but yeah, I think that's what we can do today. And thank you guys for listening in and joining us on this episode. Hope to catch you soon. Bye for now.